Welcome to another episode of Riding and Wrenching, the biggest little YouTube channel on the entire interwebs. I am your host, Q the Rider, and in today's episode, I'm going to share with you things that I've learned trying to answer some basic questions about my motorcycle insurance. So some of those questions are, if someone else wrecks my motorcycle, is it covered? Am I covered if I get into an accident riding someone else's motorcycle? What happens if two of my motorcycles are involved in the same accident? The Champ Riding School, I've mentioned that I'm going to take this class sometime next year. It takes place on a racetrack. Am I insured if I have an accident during that class? I don't know. So those are some questions that I sought to seek answers to, and also a handful of other questions, such as how would my medical bills be paid if I were involved in an accident? What about my wife? Coverage for my bike, accessories, and all of the things that are important to know if something happens. Now, before I get into the details of this, I just want to make sure everyone understands that I am not an insurance agent. I'm not an insurance expert. I'm not a financial advisor, and I do not know everything there is to know about motorcycle insurance. I'm just going to share with you what I've learned reading my policy, my 45-page insurance policy, twice. And I also called Progressive to ask some questions. And I still have questions even after that phone call. So let me run through some of the things that I learned trying to seek answers to those questions. So the first one about my own medical bills and medical bills of my wife, those are covered by my personal medical insurance. So that's good to know. At least I know how it's going to be taken care of. And so that my standard deductible would apply. But I do have a part of my insurance that provides me enough money to pay my deductible in the event of an accident. So medical bill wise, I'm covered because I've got pretty good insurance through my job. Speaking of my job, if you get into if I were to get into a motorcycle accident, loss of income, again, that's not something I'm worried about with my motorcycle insurance because I've got it covered through my job. Now, if I were self-employed or maybe a contract worker or something like that where my presence was required and absences I don't get paid for, that would be something I would have to think about differently. But fortunately for now, I'm still employed. And then there's the liability part of a motorcycle accident. What if I injure someone? What if I fall off my bike, or I drop my bike somehow and the bike hits a pedestrian, God forbid, kills them? There's a lot of liability with that you have to think about. And so that's something that I factored in with my insurance, and there with your comprehensive coverage, that has three components to it. My comprehensive coverage has three components. It has the maximum that it'll pay for a single individual for medical bills. It has a maximum that it will pay total for medical bills if there are multiple people injured. And then it has a maximum for property damage. And those are all three things that you kind of need to factor in. I mean, if I get into an accident and my bike slams into a Bentley, I got problems. Consequently, again, if the bike hits a pedestrian or somehow injures or kills someone, again, there's liability on me for that. And so that's part of what I wanted to make sure that I was adequately covered for in the insurance. Now, another big topic, especially living here in Memphis, uninsured motorist. I get fired up when I think about uninsured motorists, but because the reality is that they put other people's lives in jeopardy, or their financial lives in jeopardy by riding around uninsured, and oftentimes uninsured motorists become hit and run drivers, and so that's something that you have to specifically have in your insurance. And I learned that I didn't have it. So I'm so glad that I did this review with my policy, or with Progressive, because I fixed that problem. So now I'm covered. Now the other key component of the uninsured motorist coverage on my policy You have uninsured motorist property damage and uninsured motorist bodily injury, and they go together. You can't get one without the other. I don't particularly need the medical insurance part of it, for reasons I've already stated, but you can't get one without the other. So I definitely wanted the property damage coverage because if an uninsured motorist hit my bike, I want my bike fixed or I want it replaced or whatever without having to dig into my own pocket. Another part of getting your bike damaged is the accessories. How much money do you have invested in accessories on your bike? Your handlebars, custom seats, suspension, engine work, lighting, sound systems, you know, maybe even custom painted parts. How much money do you have tied up in that? And is that covered by your insurance policy? Well, the answer for me is I didn't have enough. Yes, I think it would probably take at least $10,000 or more to cover all of the value of all the accessories on my bike, and I was underinsured. So that's something that I've had to address. And a couple of minor things, roadside assistance, that's important. Get your bike towed. You don't have to come out of pocket for that. Getting towed can be pretty expensive. And the coverage for my policy on Progressive talks about more than just, you know, an accident. It's a mechanical breakdown. If I have a flat tire or something happens, I have coverage to the closest repair shop, which is actually kind of cool. And another factor for me is my motorcycle trailer. My motorcycle trailer is covered on my car insurance and it's covered on my bike insurance. So I'm pretty well covered there. Now, now the next few things I'm going to talk about are some surprises that I learned reading through the policy as well as talking to Progressive. Accidents at a racetrack, practicing for racing, stunt riding, or any of that, any damage caused by racing, stunting, anything like that, not covered. You are on your own. As a result, my bike will never be on a racetrack because I don't know how to race for one thing, but I don't want to damage my bike, so that's something that's important for those of you who actually put your bikes on racetracks. Make sure that you know how your bike will be covered or any injuries or anything in the event you have an accident on a racetrack. Now, Progressive has something called carried contents coverage, and that's to cover things like my cell phone or cameras or any other valuables that I might be carrying with my bike, but that are not attached to the bike. They're not part of the bike. And so that's important coverage to have because if I'm in an accident, there's a good chance my phone might get destroyed or something like that, or one of the cameras I have mounted to my bike might get damaged. Something else I learned, see, safety gear. Safety gear is covered, but I didn't have enough. I didn't have enough coverage to pay for my helmet. My Shoei helmet is like $700. I've got $500 coverage for safety gear. Wouldn't even pay for my helmet. My motorcycle trailer, I talked about that. That's covered in my policy. I also learned I'm covered if I'm riding my motorcycle through Canada. Important to know. I went to Canada last year. Supposed to be going this year, but I'm had to postpone that trip. But anywhere I'm riding in Canada, my bike is covered. And if they have different limits for liability, that's covered as well, even if it exceeds the limits that I have on the contract for my bike. Now, also motorcycle sharing programs. I know there's at least one out there. I don't know the name of it. It's kind of like an Airbnb for motorcycles. You go to some town, you can rent someone's motorcycle and bring it back. If I were to do that with my bike, which I'm not, you're not insured. You're not insured if they wreck your bike. And so that's just something that's important to know. So the other questions I have, I still don't have answers to. I've got to find out about the Champ Riding School. I don't know if I'll be covered if I have an accident there. Now, what I've learned from reading the contract, if both of my bikes are involved in the same accident, the policy limits apply as though it's one bike. Now, I believe that the property damage part of it, i.e. repairing or replacing my bikes, they're covered. It's just the medical insurance part of it doesn't double just because I have two bikes involved in the accident. So that's something that's important to know. And the situation that I can think of would be if I loan someone my bike, a friend comes in town, I let him ride my bike, and somehow we run into each other or we're both involved in the same accident. That's one claim, and the medical limits apply as though it's one bike. That's my understanding from reading the policy. I'm going to have to get some clarification from Progressive so that I'll know how much risk I'm taking if I allow someone to ride my bike and we go riding together. And this one's really important, and I still don't have an answer to it. What happens if I get into an accident on someone else's bike? Reading through the 45 pages of the contract, I didn't see where it addressed that question. So I'm going to have to go back to Progressive to try to get an answer. Now, my assumption is that that person's motorcycle insurance should cover me. But what if they don't have insurance? What if they're uninsured, they didn't tell you, or they didn't know that their insurance had lapsed, or whatever the reason is, that person doesn't have insurance or doesn't have adequate insurance? What happens then? Because there's still liability on me, the rider. So it's something that's important to know because I want to protect my financial interest. So that's all I have. I learned a lot, and I hope that this video encourages you to learn more about your insurance, to talk to your insurance provider or your financial advisor to make sure that you are covered in the event something happens. This is Q. I'm riding, I'm wrenching, and I am out.